Local residents have been frightened by news a killer might be loose in their neighborhood. Police found definite evidence of violence and foul play.
I couldn't sleep because I just knew that something was wrong.
We went down the basement. The first thing that we noticed was blood at the top of the stairs. That's when the body was located.
I got the sickest feeling in my stomach. I thought I was going to pass out.
Many people were scared. There was a killer on the loose.
Shortly after 8 a.m., we received a dispatch of a missing person. I was only about 4 blocks away from the house where I was dispatched to meet with Miss Neely. Upon my arrival, she explained that she had not heard from or seen her daughter, Tiffany, since the previous day. All calls to her cell phone were going unanswered.
Tiffany's mom was very anxious because this was just so not normal.
We learned Tiffany Brown was a 26-year-old mother who was attending the Ohio Beauty Academy, and this was extremely out of character for Tiffany. She was in communication with her friends, her family on a daily basis.
She also said the children of her daughter were left in the care of a neighbor the day before, and they had not been picked up. We learned she had young boys at home that she cared about, that she would not just leave alone without reason or without explanation. And that fact alone led me to believe that we had more here than just somebody that was going out for a good time on a Friday night. Tiffany's car was found at a apartment complex about 4 or 5 blocks from Miss Neely's home. The vehicle was unlocked, the keys were present. There's no indication of a struggle or anything of a violent nature within the automobile. We could not find any connection to that complex and her. It was very suspicious, and we were growing concerned. So that sinking feeling got deeper and deeper.
Tiffany was a devoted daughter and a mom. She had 2 young ones. She worked hard. She worked part-time, was going to school full-time. She just wanted to make a better life for her kids.
She loved taking the kids, going to the zoo and the water parks and the beach. It didn't matter. She was always wanting to do something.
She loved cars. She was right in there with me and clean her car, wash her car, show her how to take care of her car.
We would play this game where you could listen and tell what kind of car was coming down the street by the motor. And Tiffany was getting real good at that. She would light up a room, that's for sure. She got along with everybody. I didn't sleep all night. I couldn't sleep because I just knew that something was wrong.
The text messages that we received indicated that Sam Littleton was the last individual to speak with her. We learned Sam Littleton was Tiffany's mother, Deb Neely's boyfriend. They'd been together for 15 years, and Tiffany, of course, always knew Sam. So there was a parental relationship there with him. Sam had a conversation with her about noon on Friday the 11th, the day Tiffany went missing.
In this text conversation, he requested to meet with her. At that point, they really wanted to talk to Sam Littleton.
We had tried numerous times to get in contact with him, and he wouldn't return any calls. We couldn't locate Sam anywhere. This raised a lot of red flags. We asked her about how Sam was interacting with her during the past couple days.
Deb Neely was becoming concerned about Sam's behavior.
Deb indicated to us that he acted strange. She told us that he also had a cut on his hand. Sam told Deb that he had cut it while working on the fireplace upstairs, although Deb didn't see anything that had been changed in the fireplace.
At that point, there's a lot of red flags going off in her mind.
They had asked Deb if they could take a look around the house.
Detective Salyer and I went down the basement and took a look around. And the first thing that we noticed, actually on the landing above the stairs, was a drop of blood on a floor mat at the top of the stairs. Then we found numerous areas of blood spatter. When we continued our search of the basement, there was an area of the basement that was covered in debris. We started taking everything apart down there. That's when Tiffany's body was located. The body was partially clothed and wrapped in a large piece of carpeting. The apparent cause of death seemed to be a knife wound to the neck. There was multiple stab wounds and other indications of maybe asphyxiation.
When they found her, I got the sickest feeling in my stomach. I thought I was going to pass out. He said he looked at that wood, and he said he saw her hair. And he said then he looked again and he saw her hand.
At this point, it was pretty clear to us that Deb had no involvement.
Sam Littleton became the prime suspect. He's hiding key information from investigators, and now he's missing.
Richard and Gladys Russell were an elderly couple that lived just outside the city of Bellefontaine. One of the neighbors had gone to the Russells' house and noticed that their vehicle was missing from the garage. They'd been missing for maybe about 12 hours when they contacted law enforcement. We learned Mr. Russell did have some health issues. It was unusual for them to be gone for any length of time. The Logan County Sheriff's Office responded to the Russell's residence. There was no signs of a struggle in the main area of the house. They continued the investigation, and they were able to find a notepad. Mrs. Russell was very good at taking notes and keeping records, but there was no other entries made after the 16th. Now, prior to that, there were entries made every morning at approximately the same time where she was taking his blood pressure and caring for Mr. Russell. When they took a look in the garage, there was some blood found at the trunk area of where the car would have been parked. At that point, we're extremely concerned for the safety of the Russells.
Richard and Gladys were married in 1950. They had been together for 61 years and by all accounts were inseparable. They were relentlessly hardworking. Dick was a carpenter. Gladys was a bookkeeper. Each day when they would finish working 8-hour shifts at their different jobs, they would come home and tend to the farm during farming season. They were pillars in the community, heavily active in community groups and civic organizations. The Bellefontaine Lions Club, the Logan County Fish and Game Club, just, to name a few. They were incredible, well-rounded, generous people. And everybody that was familiar with them loved them, and they loved everybody back without condition.
Looking into the notepad, we found it had the name Sam written on it, and underneath the name Sam was Sam Littleton's cell phone number.
While digging into Sam's background, they found out that Sam had actually purchased his home in Bellefontaine from the Russells and had, on occasion from time to time, helped out with a few chores at their property.
Now that we know that there's a connection, we're extremely concerned. We believe that he's probably in their vehicle and might have the Russells with him. And also, he could be armed and dangerous, and we didn't know the extent of how far he would go.
The case blew up exponentially once they were unaccounted for. You had multiple law enforcement agencies looking for the elderly couple's vehicle as well as Mr. Littleton.
37-year-old Samuel Littleton is wanted for the murder of 26-year-old Tiffany Brown of Bellefontaine, Ohio, and linked to the disappearance of an elderly couple, Richard and Gladys Russell. A desperate plea from the family of a murder suspect.
We need you to come in. Just turn yourself in.
The suspect's father is clearly overwhelmed with emotion.
There was some nervousness. Many people were scared in the community. There was a killer on the loose. The Russell vehicle was found in the parking lot of a local store. They didn't see Sam Littleton, they didn't see the Russells. No sign except for some blood in the trunk.
So we obtained video information from the store on it. We see Sam Littleton. It showed he had purchased some camping gear and those types of items, which would indicate that somebody may be living in the mountains. But at the same time, information was relayed to us that a lineman had seen an individual living in the mountains that wasn't normally there. So West Virginia State Police went on a mission to locate this individual.
They began searching the area not too far from the store where the car was parked. They found Sam Littleton. He suddenly fled from them.
As we continued our search, we found he had built a makeshift cave.
Basically a primitive camp where he'd been hiding out.
There was a tarp, a sleeping bag, an axe, and some very minimal food items. After maybe an hour, Sam Littleton was apprehended by a West Virginia State Police canine. He was subsequently arrested by state police.
The fugitive had been on the run since February the 18th. Littleton was taken to a local hospital before being transported to the state police barracks in Princeton.
Sam had been on the run for over a week now. He was in a hospital gown. He had injuries from the canine, and his demeanor was just beat down. Our objective was to get as much information from Sam as we could about what happened to Tiffany. And then, of course, we also wanted to be able to locate the Russells as well. It's very important to set the tone in the first few minutes of the interview. We want Sam to talk to us. And the only way to get somebody to talk to us a lot of times is we have to be nice, even though we may not want to be nice to this individual.
Go on and have a seat. Sam, I'm going to take these cuffs off. What do you think, Sam? Scared yourself, man? So they just shoot me.
The man wanted for the murder of a 26-year-old mother from Bellefontaine, Ohio, was found hiding in the woods, apparently not far from where he ditched a car stolen from an elderly couple who are still missing.
Shortly after they found Tiff, we had a prayer vigil and everybody was there. As the funeral was going on, everybody's phones started blowing up.
You could hear the people's phones going off, and they'd say, you know, we got him, we got him. It was like kind of a rejoicing when he got caught.
When Sam got arrested, there was no signs of the Russells. So we didn't know if the Russells were dead. We needed to expedite as much information as we can from Sam and hopefully locate the Russells.
Sam, obviously, we've got a million questions for you. And we realized through this investigation, things went really wrong at some point. We just ask that you help us out, help yourself out, man.
What part is easier for you to talk about? Can you tell me what happened with Tiffany, or would you rather talk about Mr. and Mrs. Russell?
I really don't know how it got started. I think evil thoughts all the time.
Evil thoughts all the time?
All the time. I mean, that's why I keep myself away from people.
Okay.
I mean, there ain't 1 minute that I don't sit here and think about how to snap somebody's neck, crush their head. I mean, there's many, many times I could have just cut my stepmom up. Why would people think of that? Like right now, they're still in there. They're still in there. I've done a lot of bad things in my life. A lot of bad things. Well, if you're from Bell Fountain, you know my history.
To be honest, that's what's kind of confusing. I mean, you've got a couple things. Well, what I would consider very minor, with some marijuana, things like that. So you've done a pretty good job of being able to control things. You know what I mean? I mean, really, I've definitely seen a lot worse in a history.
You've seen people have thoughts like this?
Than what you have. I've heard of people telling me this before, that they've had thoughts, but I don't have any, I'll be honest, I don't have any knowledge of what that's like. So I appreciate what you're telling me, because it helps me understand where you're coming from a little bit.
So we're being honest?
Absolutely.
You know the first thing popped in my mind?
What's that, sir?
How I can get your head to bounce off that thing back there. And I'm being honest. Why does people have thoughts like that?
He's trying to scare us. He wants to be the big bad guy here, and he wants to try to establish some point of dominance. I'm sure it was a test to see what our reaction was going to be, but we're just going to continue on with the interview and pretend like that part never happened.
I mean, why can't I have good thoughts? Why can't I have good thoughts? There ain't no good thoughts. They're all evil.
I think if you dig real deep, you can find those good thoughts.
I've been digging for years.
You might have to dig real deep, but I mean, there's people out there that love you.
And we've talked to tons of your friends.
Your friends all believe in you. I mean,
absolutely.
They were like shocked that any of this could have ever happened with you. I mean, they really, this blows them away.
It still blows me away. I just want to crawl up in that hole and just die. That's all I want to tell you. I just want to crawl up in that hole and die. I deserve to die. I deserve to die.
You need to feel better about yourself, and the only way you're ever going to do that is to tell what happened. And all three of us know that you're a smart enough guy that you know exactly what happened. Is this something easy to talk about? Absolutely not. We all know it's extremely tough and difficult. I'm trying to make him feel like we believe he's a good person. He's got to be comfortable with us. He's got to think that we like him. If we like him, he's going to like us. And if you like somebody, you're more apt to tell them things that you don't want to tell.
See, that's kind of hard to believe. I'm a lazy dude.
I would be scared. Mike would be scared if something like this happened.
How many days ago was this?
Sam, do you remember anything about the Russells? Being at their house last week?
No, I ain't been at the Russells in a long time. Actually, me and Deb was just talking about I need to get out there and talk to them.
You know, we've got a million theories, Sam. When when it comes to the Russells, we know that the Russells liked you and that you guys had a connection there. We've been told you would even be a nice enough guy and would go out and sometimes help the Russells around the farm, okay? Lo and behold, we find you in their car. And there's a lot that happened in between there. A lot.
We needed to find out if the Russells were deceased, so the pressure builds.
We knew he was holding back information. He knew what had happened to the Russells, what he had done to them. He's just a coward, just a monster of a person.
How'd you end up with the car, Sam? I mean, the keys to their car is in your pocket. Your fingerprints are all over that car.
If I just went there and stole the car?
And I believe that they more than likely went with you without a struggle, because that house is immaculate.
Sam, were either Mr. and Mrs. Russell ever sitting beside you in that vehicle?
Do you deny the fact that you took Mr. and Mrs. Russell's car?
No. I got the car.
Sam, yes or no, did you kill the Russells?
No. Sam, remember, the very first thing that you told us when we sit down was, I deserve to die for what I've done. That tells us you know what you did. What's left for you is to get it off your chest. Help you feel a little bit better. Give closure to those families. You love the Russells. We know you like the Russells. They helped you. You helped them. You did work for them. The only reason why these things happen is because you got scared.
And it's so hard for you to talk about, Sam, I think, because you're a good person and this has truly eaten you up.
You've wanted to do the right thing all along.
Well, why ain't I?
The right thing is not always the easiest thing to do. That's what's holding back.
Sam's withholding a lot of information, so we decided that we would focus on the relationship between Sam and Deb, and hopefully that would help Sam go ahead and open up and tell us what had happened.
Deb, Jesus, she needs closure. You know, not only did she lose her daughter, but she lost the love of her life. She doesn't know why. I don't think I'd be wrong to say, Sam, that you can't be with Deb for 18 years and not love her. But I think you can certainly tell us what happened. I think you remember just like it was yesterday.
It all started with Tiffany. And that's something you can't forget either. Can you tell me what happened with Tiffany that day?
She walked in.
Did you ask Tiffany to come down the basement with you? Or did she come downstairs on her own?
Remember arguing. And after that, it went bad. Right, I tried. You gonna get sick? Yeah.
You need some more water too, or?
Please. You alright, man? Yeah, it is. Want me to leave the door open? Come here. Ain't like I can run anywhere.
I've never had a suspect get physically ill during an interview before. He doesn't want to relive that event. He just doesn't want to talk about those things because it makes him physically ill. Everything about him is telling us that he just wants to give up. We needed to push him to keep talking.
Okay. You said something really bad happened to Tiffany, but we don't know exactly what. So I guess why does that bother you that something bad happened to her if you don't know what happened?
I know something happened to her. I'm having dreams.
What kind of dreams are you having?
Bad dreams. Bad dreams.
And that's why you want to die. That's guilt. You close your eyes and you see it. That's not somebody who enjoyed doing what you did. That's guilt. The only reason you feel guilty is because you do care. You do care about what Deb thinks. And you know she deserves to know what happened. Can we agree on that?
She was my whole wife. I couldn't do nothing without her.
So the only thing left is just to tell what happened.
Mm-hmm. You get me back in the state of Ohio and I'll tell you everything.
Be honest with me. I get you back in the States. Am I going to be able to find the Russells? And they're together?
I can't remember that.
But you'll be able to remember when I get you back in Ohio.
I can't. I'm being honest with you. I don't know.
You see, the only thing that we have to go on are the words that you tell us. And when you say stuff to us like, get me back to Ohio and I'll tell you everything, we believe you, we trust you. And then when we try to talk about it here, then you say you don't remember. So how, do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, I understand y'all too completely. I mean, okay. y'all being right down center of the line, ain't beating around no bush. I'm telling you right now, man, it's head just ain't letting me do nothing right now. Just driving. I ended up places that I can't remember. I just remember getting chased. That's where I went with truck stops. God, I want to remember. Yeah, my head is full. It's split.
Sam, the sooner that you tell us, the sooner this is all over.
You got the theory. Help me out.
He's starting to close down. We needed to go in a different direction.
It ain't gonna get no better.
Sam's father contacted us and asked if he could speak to Sam. And we felt like we were at a point where maybe his dad had some insight or influence on Sam that would help us to locate the Russells.
Your dad was in here today and he's got faith in you. When it comes to doing the right thing, he reassured Scott and I that you would do the right thing. Scott and I made a promise that we're going to keep to your father. He wants to see you and tell you he loves you. We're a man of our word. We're going to let that happen if you wanted to.
Yeah, let's sit down to my headache.
It's up to you, man.
Nobody just brought a gun and it just blew me away right here. Do everybody a world of favors.
I don't think that's going to happen. You tell me what you want to do.
Bring them in and get them.
Are you sure?
I ain't for sure about a lot of things right now.
We spoke to Sam's father before to let him know what we were trying to do. He was there to get Sam to tell us exactly what happened. But we were taking a gamble on Sam's father coming into the room and assisting us in the investigation.
Mr. Littleton, you can have a seat there. Okay.
It would be very easy for a family member just to let Sam know, hey, don't say another word, and I'll get an attorney for you. But we had decided that it would be a missed opportunity to get some more information out of him, so we may as well go ahead and do this.
Is it okay if I tell your dad what you've told us so far? Sam's told us that something bad happened to to the elderly couple. He's not able to tell us what happened, but he knows that they were alive when he was first with them, right? And then Sam says not exactly the details about what happened with Tiffany, but is able to tell us that something bad happened there at the house. We don't know if he's intentionally not telling us, or whether, it's truly something that he's blocking out right now.
Sam, I love you. Woman, you was doing so good.
I know.
You done bought you a home. You done bought you a truck. You had your motorcycle.
I tell everybody a long time ago that I wasn't right in the head. Ain't no excuse. From far, Can't take back what I've done.
What'd you do? What have you done this time?
I don't know. I don't know.
What made you do this?
I've always had these thoughts. Now, if I come to you and told you about these thoughts, what's the first thing you're going to think of? This psycho. He needs locked up.
No. If you'd have come to me, I'd took you to a doctor somewhere. Somehow, I'd have got you to a doctor. We'd have found out something about getting you some help. You need help.
What kind of help are you going to give somebody like that? Come on, Dad, have you ever had a thought of that? I'm your own best bud. Have you ever had a thought like that in your mind? Then why would I? I'd be setting to work, grinding, and wanting to hurt somebody. Why? That's not my nature. You didn't grow me up to be that way. I didn't mean to bring this all on you. I don't know. I don't know why. I don't know why. I don't know why.
I wish you'd have come to your daddy with it. Years ago, boy.
I'm just tired. I'm just tired.
You doing all right, Sam?
I don't mean to bring this on you, but this is probably going to be the last time I get to see you, so.
I know it.
And these guys probably went out of their way just to have you come in here, so. I don't mean to do the cussing and all that. I don't.
Sam, these 2 right here have been nice to me this morning. While you was out at the hospital, I come out here and they talked to me like I was a human being.
Same way, I'm a criminal, and these 2 guys sit down and talk to me like I was a man. They didn't treat me no different. They treated me with respect, and they have been ever since.
Having the father in the room there may have been a turning point. Sam was talking with us more freely. It seemed like he wanted to tell his dad, but he didn't know how to tell his dad. We just felt like he was going to tell if we pushed him at this point.
And like we said, the only way that we can end it real quick is for you to be able to tell us everything. You tell us one time, it's out there, it's done, and you don't tell anybody ever again. I mean, that's the quickest way.
Can you pinpoint where they got after? What highways was you on?
I thought it was 75, so I don't know, Dad. I mean, that's the only road I know. It's a straight shot. You know what I'm saying?
Tell us where those people are?
I mean, I want to. I just don't know. I'm just a bad person. I tried to tell you that the other day. I'm so sorry, man. I know it. And I hope.
Absolutely. Sam, are you okay with that?
I love you.
Pretty sore, Sam.
Mommy and I would.
Having his dad in the room really helped the situation. Sam basically admits to his dad that he did it. He doesn't come out and say that, but he never tells his dad he didn't do it. That was big.
You make sure he's all right. He's got bad back, bad legs.
We will make sure that he's okay.
Now we're at a point where he's already decided, my dad knows this bad thing has happened. He's just about ready now. If the opportunity is given to him, he's going to speak about committing the crimes.
Like I said, both of us have been up front with each other. You know that we know. You know that we believe that you're trying to help us, okay? So that's why we're working with you on it.
I'm going to be as direct as I can possibly be. Regarding Tiffany, how did you kill her? You know what happened. It's just way, way too hard to say it. I just hope you can find in your heart to do the right thing here. Tell us what happened.
I think I strangled her.
Okay. Any other type of weapon that you used?
I think I might have stabbed her once or twice.
Now, where she was placed, that obviously was so she wouldn't be easily found. Is that a fair statement?
I can't remember where she was now. I know the basement.
Okay. And the Russells.
Did you strangle both of those two?
I mean, I'm strangled. I ain't for sure.
And then did you stab them afterwards too? Just like Tiffany?
I think I might have done Dick.
Can you tell us if it was after you left the house or whether it was still there at the house?
I think it was at the house.
After you had killed them, were they in the trunk? Or did you put them in any other part of the car?
He was drunk.
We finally got his confession that he killed them. I think he was tired and he was ready to just admit to what he had done. At this point, the only thing we don't know is exactly where the Russells are located.
Sam, is there any way we can recover their bodies?
Railroad tracks and a cotton field.
Railroad tracks and a cotton field. Do you think one body is by the railroad tracks and one by the cotton field, or do you think?
Yeah. All I know is I didn't get off 75 Barry Park.
All right, man.
Thanks, Sam.
Sam's information about the location of their bodies was vague, and he couldn't ever tell us what exit he'd gotten off, what road they were on. He would only say near a cotton field and near railroad tracks.
Outside of Chattanooga, Tennessee, local law enforcement were able to find the remains of Dick Russell. He was next to some railroad tracks covered in debris. We were doing a search on the area, but we couldn't locate Gladys. A week later, Gladys Russell was found in Georgia. He had laid Gladys in a cotton field a few hundred miles south of where Dick Russell had been located.
Without the confession, if Sam Littleton had decided to end the interview, the families would have just been devastated because they would have never known what happened to them or got their bodies back for a proper burial.
We have mixed emotions. He never gave us the exact reason why things happened, why he decided to kill the Russells, and why he decided to kill Tiffany, and I'm sure it haunts her family to this day.
Hundreds of mourners came to the First Church of God for Tiffany Brown's funeral. They say they're consoling the family and helping them get through the burial of Tiffany Brown at the Bell Fountain Cemetery, just a few blocks away from the church.
The outpouring was just unreal. And even the police officers, friends of ours that we know, it almost seemed like they hurt as much as we did when we got to the funeral.
Sam Littleton's hands were shaking so bad that he could barely sign the plea agreement that keeps him alive but puts him in prison until he dies.
That brought a lot of great relief to the families. I know that there were some that wish for the death penalty, but in the end, justice was served.
Every day, I miss seeing her, and she's not here to see these boys grow up. And that bothers me. Her oldest is going to graduate next year, and she's not here to see that.
I miss her every day, every minute. You miss the communication that's gone. The text messages in the morning, kiss on the cheek, and love you, Dad. That's the hardest thing about it. It's gone. She is missed dearly every day.
The murder of Sharon Hammock. There are crimes that make headlines for a week. Others vanish beneath the relentless tide of new tragedies, slowly dissolving into forgotten newspaper archives and dusty evidence lockers. And then there are the cases that refuse to disappear. They linger like shadows stretching across generations, haunting investigators who retire without answers, families who spend decades trapped between grief and uncertainty, and entire communities forced to wonder whether the person responsible has been living quietly among them all along. The murder of Sharon Hammock belongs to that rare and unsettling category, a cold case so deeply buried in time that many believed it would never be solved. For nearly half a century, silence protected a killer. The evidence waited. The questions multiplied. The memories faded. Yet somewhere beneath decades of dust, one forgotten truth refused to die. The story begins in Kentucky during the mid-1970s, a time when life moved more slowly. Neighbors recognized every passing face, and children disappeared into the woods or crossed quiet roads without drawing concern. It was an America untouched by smartphones, surveillance cameras, GPS tracking, or DNA databases capable of exposing a murderer decades after the crime. Trust came easily. Doors were often left unlocked. Small towns carried the comforting illusion that terrible things happened somewhere else. Until one day, they didn't. Sharon Hammock was young, full of ordinary hopes, surrounded by people who never imagined her name would someday become synonymous with one of Kentucky's oldest unresolved homicide investigations. Friends remembered her as someone with dreams still unfolding, a young woman whose future appeared as open as the rolling countryside around her. Nothing suggested that her life would soon become frozen in a single horrifying moment, transforming her into the center of a mystery that investigators would chase for generations. No one wakes expecting their life to become evidence. No family answers the telephone believing the next conversation will divide their lives into 2 chapters, before and after. Yet tragedy has never cared about ordinary expectations. The day Sharon disappeared, uncertainty spread faster than panic. At first, there were reasonable explanations. Maybe she had changed her plans. Maybe she had accepted a ride. Maybe she had stopped somewhere unexpected. Hours passed. Concern quietly replaced confidence. Then concern hardened into fear. As daylight faded, the search became urgent. Family members began retracing familiar routes. Friends contacted one another. Neighbors joined the effort. Every passing minute carried growing weight because everyone understood the same frightening reality. This was no longer routine. Then came the discovery, the moment that shattered every hopeful possibility. Sharon was found dead. What had begun as a missing persons search instantly transformed into a homicide investigation. The crime scene presented investigators with a terrible contradiction. There was unmistakable evidence that violence had occurred, yet the person responsible had left remarkably little behind. No obvious eyewitness stepped forward with a complete account. No immediate confession surfaced. No single clue pointed investigators directly toward the killer. Instead, they faced what every homicide detective dreads most: fragments, scattered details, unfinished stories, half-remembered conversations, tiny observations that seemed insignificant on their own but might have carried enormous importance if assembled correctly. Detectives secured the scene using the investigative standards available at the time. Photographs documented every angle. Physical evidence was carefully collected. Interviews began almost immediately. Every family member, friend, acquaintance, co-worker, and possible witness became part of an expanding timeline. Who had seen Sharon last? Who knew where she was going? Did anyone notice an unfamiliar vehicle? Had anyone heard an argument? Did Sharon mention meeting someone? Each answer generated new questions instead of certainty. Investigators quickly realized they were racing against something just as dangerous as the killer himself: time. Every hour allowed memories to fade. Every passing day increased the chance that physical evidence would be lost forever. Every week made witnesses slightly less certain about what they thought they remembered. This was long before digital records could reconstruct movements automatically. There were no cell phone location histories. No social media posts marked exact times. No security cameras watching every intersection. Building a timeline depended almost entirely upon human memory. And memory is notoriously fragile. Still, detectives refused to accept defeat. They knocked on doors across neighborhoods. They followed rumors. They compared statements repeatedly. Every inconsistency demanded explanation. Every coincidence required examination. For the community, fear spread quietly but relentlessly. Parents began calling children home before sunset. Doors that once remained unlocked were secured each night. Ordinary routines suddenly felt dangerous. Every unfamiliar face attracted suspicion. People whispered the same unsettling possibility. If someone could murder Sharon, who will be next? The investigation soon expanded beyond the immediate crime scene. Detectives examined Sharon's relationships, searching for conflict, hidden tensions, or anyone with reason to harm her. They studied her recent activities, hoping one overlooked encounter might reveal the missing connection. Nothing provided a clear answer. Instead, investigators encountered what would become the defining characteristic of the case: contradiction. Some witnesses believed they had seen Sharon shortly before her death. Others recalled entirely different timelines. Descriptions varied. Vehicles differed. Details conflicted. Every promising lead seemed to collapse beneath closer examination. Rumors began spreading faster than verified facts. In small communities, information rarely travels in straight lines. It bends. It grows. It changes. One conversation becomes 10. A suspicion becomes accepted truth. An innocent misunderstanding becomes permanent local legend. Detectives found themselves separating fact from fiction while simultaneously searching for a killer who appeared increasingly capable of disappearing into ordinary life. That possibility disturbed everyone involved, because the most frightening murderers rarely look frightening. They attend church. They go to work. They smile. They shake hands. They wave at neighbors. They stand in grocery store checkout lines. Sometimes they even help search for the victim. History has repeatedly shown that monsters often wear remarkably ordinary faces. Investigators considered every possibility. Was Sharon targeted by someone she knew? Did she encounter a stranger? Was the attack planned? Or had a seemingly random encounter spiraled into unimaginable violence? Each theory explained certain facts while leaving others unanswered. The evidence resisted simple conclusions. Meanwhile, Sharon's family entered the unbearable rhythm familiar to victims' relatives across countless unsolved cases. Funeral. Sympathy. Silence. At first, reporters called regularly. Then less often. Eventually almost never. Friends tried offering comfort, yet no words could explain why justice remained out of reach. Birthdays arrived. Anniversaries passed. The empty chair remained empty. While investigators continued reviewing evidence, life outside the case moved relentlessly forward. Children grew up. Businesses changed ownership. Roads were widened. Neighborhoods evolved. But somewhere inside police files, Sharon's name remained exactly where investigators had left it. Waiting. Cold cases possess a unique cruelty. Unlike solved homicides, they deny families the certainty that allows healing to begin. Unlike disappearances, they confirm death while withholding accountability. The killer becomes invisible. The victim becomes permanent. Years slowly transformed into decades. Boxes containing evidence were relocated, reopened, reorganized, then stored again. New detectives inherited reports written by investigators who had long since retired. Margins filled with handwritten notes. Photographs slowly faded. Cassette-recorded interviews aged alongside everyone who had spoken into them. Technology changed dramatically during those decades. Forensic science advanced beyond anything investigators could have imagined during the original investigation. DNA analysis evolved from experimental possibility into one of modern criminal justice's most powerful tools. Fingerprint databases expanded. Digital record systems transformed evidence management. Cold cases once considered hopeless suddenly found new life through scientific breakthroughs. Across America, investigators began solving murders committed 20, 30, even 50 years earlier. Families received phone calls they had stopped expecting. Some killers died before arrest. Others were shocked to discover that evidence they believed meaningless decades earlier had quietly preserved their identities. Every solved cold case inspired hope elsewhere, including Kentucky. Detectives periodically reopened Sharon Hammock's file, asking the same painful question that had haunted investigators since the very beginning. What do we miss? Sometimes the answer to a decades-old murder isn't hidden in new evidence. Sometimes it waits inside old evidence that science finally learns how to read. Each generation of investigators viewed the file differently. Fresh eyes noticed overlooked inconsistencies. Modern forensic specialists re-examined preserved evidence using techniques unavailable during the 1970s. Laboratories capable of extracting genetic information from minuscule biological samples represented possibilities that earlier detectives never possessed. The investigation gradually shifted from relying primarily upon fading witness memories towards something far more objective: science. But science can only examine what still exists. Evidence lost forever remains silent forever. That reality placed enormous importance upon every item preserved from the original crime scene. Every envelope, every photograph, every carefully labeled exhibit. Someone decades earlier had unknowingly protected the future by preserving pieces of the past. No one involved could yet understand how significant those decisions would eventually become. For Sharon's family, however, each renewed investigation carried emotional risk. Hope can be painful. Every announcement suggesting progress reopened wounds that never fully healed. Every dead enforced them to relive the same crushing disappointment. Imagine waiting not days or months, but decades for a knock on the door that may never come. Imagine watching investigators retire one after another while your questions remain exactly the same. Imagine realizing that the person responsible for your loved one's death might already have lived an entire lifetime untouched by justice. That possibility haunted everyone connected to the case. Some community members eventually convinced themselves the truth would never emerge. Others refused to surrender faith. Some believed the killer had died. Others believed he remained alive, blending into ordinary society with terrifying success. No one could prove either theory. The file remained open. The questions remained unanswered. The silence remained overwhelming. Yet buried beneath years of frustration, one undeniable fact survived every passing decade. Someone knew exactly what happened. Someone had carried that memory since the day Sharon Hammock lost her life. Whether hidden by fear, guilt, loyalty, or calculation, the truth still existed somewhere beyond the pages of the investigative file, waiting patiently as the decades rolled forward, unaware that the march of time itself was beginning to transform the greatest weakness of the original investigation into its greatest strength. The investigation pressed forward with a growing sense of urgency, but every passing day underscored the same harsh reality. The first hours after a homicide are often the most critical. Detectives revisited the crime scene repeatedly, examining the surrounding area from different angles, searching for anything that might have been overlooked in the initial response. Roads, fields, wooded areas, and nearby properties were scrutinized again and again. Investigators documented physical evidence using the forensic methods available at the time, aware that every item collected could one day prove significant, even if its value was not yet fully understood. Interviews quickly became the heart of the investigation. Family members were asked to recount Sharon Hammock's recent activities in meticulous detail. Friends were questioned about conversations, planned meetings, routines, and anything unusual in the days leading up to her death. Coworkers, acquaintances, neighbors, and anyone believed to have crossed paths with her were interviewed. Detectives compared accounts, searching for consistent details that could establish a reliable timeline. Building that timeline proved extraordinarily difficult. Some recollections aligned, others conflicted. Small discrepancies emerged over times, locations, and sequences of events. Such inconsistencies are common in major investigations, particularly when witnesses are attempting to reconstruct ordinary moments after an unexpected tragedy. Human memory is rarely as precise as investigators hope, especially when days have passed before every detail is formally recorded. Despite extensive interviews, no single statement immediately identified a suspect. Investigators explored multiple possibilities rather than committing prematurely to one theory. They examined Sharon's known relationships, her recent movements, and any circumstances that might have brought her into contact with someone capable of violence. Detectives also considered whether the crime could have involved an unknown offender. At that stage, there was insufficient evidence to conclusively support any single explanation. The uncertainty weighed heavily on the community. News of the homicide spread quickly across the region. Residents who had once viewed violent crime as something distant suddenly found themselves confronting the reality that a young woman's life had been taken close to home. Conversations shifted from ordinary routines to questions about safety. Parents became more cautious. Evening outings were reconsidered. Rumors circulated alongside verified information, often making the investigators' work even more complicated. Law enforcement repeatedly appealed for information. Even seemingly insignificant observations, detectives emphasized, might help reconstruct the events surrounding Sharon's death. Someone might remember an unfamiliar vehicle. Another person might recall an unexpected encounter or conversation that had appeared meaningless at the time. Investigators understood that homicide cases are sometimes solved not through a single dramatic discovery, but through the careful combination of many small facts. As the weeks turned into months, however, the breakthrough everyone hoped for failed to materialize. The investigation remained active, but momentum inevitably slowed. Leads were pursued, evaluated, and either expanded or eliminated based on available evidence. Some tips appeared promising before being disproven. Others lacked sufficient corroboration to move the investigation forward. Detectives documented every development, recognizing that information dismissed today could acquire new significance years later if viewed in a different context. That careful documentation would become one of the case's greatest strengths. Although forensic science in the 1970s was far less advanced than it is today, experienced investigators understood the importance of preserving evidence whenever possible. Physical exhibits collected during the original investigation were retained according to the standards of the time. Reports, photographs, witness statements, and laboratory findings were organized into investigative files that would eventually span decades. No one could predict how dramatically forensic technology would evolve. In the years that followed, criminal investigations across the United States entered a period of remarkable scientific advancement. DNA profiling transformed the field of forensic identification. Techniques that once required relatively large biological samples gradually became capable of analyzing far smaller amounts of genetic material. Cases previously considered unsolvable were reopened as laboratories developed increasingly sensitive methods. Across the country, investigators began looking back at unsolved homicides with renewed optimism. Evidence collected years earlier suddenly carried possibilities that had not existed when those crimes were first investigated. For families waiting decades for answers, these developments offered cautious hope. For detectives responsible for cold cases, they represented an entirely new set of investigative tools. The Sharon Hammock investigation was among the many cases preserved within this changing landscape. Although no immediate solution emerged, the decision to retain evidence allowed future investigators the opportunity to revisit the case using technologies unavailable to the original detectives. Cold case investigations differ fundamentally from active homicide inquiries. Rather than responding to rapidly developing events, investigators often begin by reconstructing the original case from thousands of pages of reports, photographs, forensic records, and interview transcripts. Every decision made decades earlier is reviewed. Every piece of preserved evidence is reassessed. Detectives ask not only what was discovered, but also what could not yet be analyzed using the scientific capabilities of the time. This process requires patience. Investigators must separate historical assumptions from established facts. Theories accepted years earlier are tested against newly available evidence. Questions once considered unanswerable may become scientifically approachable. That methodical approach has solved numerous cold cases throughout the United States, demonstrating that time, while often an obstacle, can also become an investigative advantage. Even so, success is never guaranteed. Biological evidence may have degraded. Potential witnesses may have passed away. Memories inevitably fade. Records can become incomplete despite investigators' best efforts to preserve them. Each cold case, therefore, presents its own unique combination of opportunity and limitation. As Sharon's case remained unresolved, the passage of time altered the investigation in unexpected ways. Detectives assigned to the file changed repeatedly over the years as careers advanced and retirements occurred. Each new investigator inherited not only boxes of evidence, but also the responsibility of understanding decisions made by predecessors decades earlier. Fresh perspectives occasionally generated new questions, prompting additional interviews or renewed examination of existing material. The case remained open. It was never formally forgotten. For Sharon's family, however, the distinction between an open investigation and a solved case offered only limited comfort. The loss remained permanent. Anniversaries continued to arrive each year. Birthdays served as reminders of the future that had been taken away. While public attention gradually shifted toward newer crimes, the family continued living with unanswered questions that could not simply be set aside. Their experience reflected that of many families connected to long-term unsolved homicides. Justice delayed carries emotional consequences that extend far beyond the courtroom. Without an arrest, there's no trial. Without a trial, many questions remain unresolved. Even when investigators continue working diligently behind the scenes, the absence of visible progress can leave families wondering whether answers will ever come. Law enforcement agencies increasingly recognized these realities as cold case units became more common. Specialized investigators developed expertise in reviewing historical evidence, coordinating advanced forensic testing, and collaborating with laboratories capable of applying modern scientific methods to decades-old material. By the late 20th century and into the early 21st, technological progress had fundamentally changed expectations. Cases once viewed as permanently unsolved were no longer automatically considered beyond reach. Instead, investigators asked a different question. Not whether science could help, but whether enough evidence had survived for science to work with. For Sharon Hammock's case, that question would become increasingly important as forensic capabilities continued to advance. Every preserved item represented potential information waiting to be unlocked by techniques unavailable to the original investigators. The value of careful evidence preservation, often invisible in the early years of an investigation, grew steadily as laboratories developed new methods capable of extracting meaningful results from material that earlier generations could not fully interpret. The passage of nearly half a century changed almost everything surrounding the case. Communities evolved. Roads changed. Technology transformed daily life. Entire generations grew up with little awareness of the homicide that had once shaken the region. Yet inside secured evidence storage, the investigation remained frozen in time. Reports still described the same crime. Photographs still documented the same scene. Physical evidence still waited for questions that had not yet been answered. Investigators understood that the truth, if it could still be established, would most likely emerge not from speculation or rumor, but from the careful intersection of preserved evidence, advancing forensic science, and the persistence of those unwilling to accept that the passage of time should determine whether justice is ultimately achieved. By the early years of the 21st century, cold case investigations across the United States were entering a new era. Advances in forensic science had already transformed numerous long unsolved homicide investigations, demonstrating that evidence collected decades earlier could still reveal critical information when examined with modern techniques. Law enforcement agencies increasingly recognized that preserving physical evidence, even when immediate answers proved elusive, could one day provide opportunities unavailable to the original investigators. The file concerning Sharon Hammock remained among those periodically reviewed as investigative methods evolved. Detectives assigned to historical cases approached the material with fresh perspectives, carefully studying original reports, witness interviews, crime scene photographs, laboratory records, and evidence inventories. Rather than assuming earlier investigators had overlooked obvious clues, modern detectives sought to determine whether scientific developments could extract new information from evidence that had already been collected and preserved. This review process was deliberate and methodical. Every document was examined for consistency. Every timeline was reconstructed. Every investigative decision was evaluated within the context of the tools available at the time it had been made. The goal was not to rewrite history, but to understand it completely. Cold case investigators often describe their work as assembling a puzzle whose pieces have been scattered across decades. Some pieces are physical evidence. Others are interview transcripts, laboratory findings, handwritten investigative notes, or records documenting previous leads. Occasionally, a detail considered insignificant years earlier becomes meaningful when viewed alongside newly developed forensic capabilities. Throughout these reviews, detectives remained careful to distinguish confirmed facts from speculation. Rumors that had circulated within the community during the original investigation were weighed against documented evidence rather than accepted at face value. Witness statements were compared with contemporaneous records to determine where accounts aligned and where uncertainties remained. Such caution is essential in long-term investigations. Memories naturally change over time. Stories repeated over decades may become unintentionally altered. Investigators therefore place greatest weight on evidence recorded closest to the original events, while also recognizing that advances in science may reveal information independent of human recollection. Meanwhile, the broader landscape of forensic identification continued to change. Improvements in DNA analysis, laboratory procedures, and evidence handling expanded the range of cases that could realistically be revisited. Biological samples once considered too limited for meaningful examination sometimes became suitable for testing using techniques developed years later. Not every historical case benefited equally from these advances. The availability and condition of preserved evidence varied considerably. Some investigations lacked usable biological material. Others contained evidence that had degraded over time despite careful storage. Each case required an individual assessment to determine what scientific opportunities remained. For Sharon Hammock's investigation, the continued preservation of evidence ensured that future reviews remained possible. Detectives understood that unanswered questions could only be addressed through careful analysis supported by verifiable facts. Any potential breakthrough would need to withstand scientific scrutiny as well as legal review if charges were ever contemplated. The work demanded patience rather than dramatic revelations. Progress often occurred gradually. Laboratory examinations required time. Historical records needed careful verification. Investigators coordinated with forensic specialists, prosecutors, and evidence custodians to ensure that every procedural step met contemporary legal standards. For Sharon's family, each renewed examination represented another possibility that long-awaited answers might eventually emerge. At the same time, investigators understood the importance of avoiding premature conclusions. Hope had to be balanced with evidence. Any public statement concerning developments would ultimately need to reflect what could be demonstrated through reliable investigative findings rather than assumption or speculation. As the decades continued to pass, one principle guided those responsible for the case. While time can complicate an investigation, it does not erase the obligation to pursue the truth whenever credible opportunities arise. Decades after the original investigation began, the meaning of a cold case had changed. It no longer signified an abandoned file resting untouched on a shelf. Instead, it represented an investigation waiting for the right combination of technology, preserved evidence, and renewed attention. Across the United States, law enforcement agencies increasingly revisited historical homicides, recognizing that advances in forensic science had created opportunities unimaginable when many of those crimes first occurred. Within that broader movement, Sharon Hammock's case continued to receive periodic review. Detectives responsible for cold cases approached the investigation with the understanding that every conclusion had to be supported by verifiable evidence. Earlier reports, photographs, laboratory findings, and witness statements were examined together rather than in isolation, allowing investigators to identify questions that modern forensic methods might help answer. This process required discipline. Investigators resisted the temptation to rely on assumptions that had developed over the years. Community rumors, media speculation, and informal theories were carefully separated from documented investigative facts. Only information supported by evidence could ultimately contribute to a prosecutable case. Modern forensic laboratories also operated under standards that emphasize scientific reliability and detailed documentation. Before any historical evidence could be retested, investigators first verified its condition, storage history, and chain of custody. These safeguards were essential because any future prosecution would depend not only on scientific findings, but also on demonstrating that evidence had been preserved appropriately from the time it was originally collected. At the same time, prosecutors and investigators worked closely together to evaluate whether additional testing might produce information capable of advancing the case. Decisions regarding forensic analysis were made carefully, recognizing that some evidence could only be examined once using certain techniques. Strategic planning, therefore, became as important as scientific capability itself. Cold case work is often characterized by long periods of careful preparation followed by incremental progress rather than sudden breakthroughs. Laboratory testing may require months. Historical records frequently need verification through multiple independent sources. Witnesses who remain available are interviewed with careful attention to what they personally remember, distinguishing first-hand knowledge from information learned later through media coverage or community discussion. Throughout these reviews, investigators remained aware of the emotional impact such developments could have on surviving family members. Public announcements were generally made cautiously, reflecting only those findings that could be confirmed. Families who had lived with uncertainty for decades deserved accuracy rather than speculation. The broader history of cold case investigations demonstrates why such restraint matters. Scientific advances have solved many historical homicides, but successful prosecutions depend on evidence meeting rigorous legal standards. Every forensic result must withstand independent examination. Every investigative conclusion must be supported by documentation rather than inference alone. For Sharon Hammock's case, the continued preservation of evidence meant that possibilities remained open even after many years had passed. While time had altered the community, changed investigative personnel, and transformed forensic science, the central objective never changed. Detectives sought to establish what could be proven through reliable evidence, ensuring that any future resolution would rest on facts capable of standing both in court and in the historical record. The investigation, therefore, continued not because of renewed speculation, but because advances in science and the careful preservation of evidence kept alive the possibility that questions left unanswered for decades might eventually receive evidence-based answers. As forensic science continued to evolve, investigators responsible for historical homicide cases increasingly relied on a principle that had transformed criminal investigations nationwide. Evidence does not become less important simply because it becomes older. In many cases, the opposite proved true. Material collected decades earlier, preserved with care, could provide opportunities unavailable to the detectives who originally handled the investigation. By this stage, reviewing a cold case involved far more than reopening a file. Investigators worked alongside forensic specialists, laboratory personnel, prosecutors, and evidence custodians to determine what additional examinations could reasonably be conducted. Every proposed step required careful planning, not only to maximize the potential value of the evidence, but also to ensure that any future findings would satisfy modern legal standards. Advances in DNA technology played an increasingly significant role in these efforts. Techniques capable of analyzing very small or previously unsuitable biological samples had expanded the range of evidence that could be evaluated. At the same time, improvements in laboratory procedures reduced the likelihood of contamination and strengthened confidence in scientifically supported conclusions. Even so, investigators understood that forensic science is not a substitute for thorough investigative work. Scientific testing can identify or exclude individuals under appropriate circumstances, but it must always be interpreted within the broader context of documented evidence. Detectives therefore continue to examine witness statements, historical timelines, crime scene documentation, and other investigative records alongside laboratory findings. This balanced approach reflected lessons learned from decades of cold case investigations across the country. Successful resolutions rarely depended on a single discovery alone. Instead, they often resulted from the convergence of multiple independent pieces of evidence that, when considered together, established a clear and legally supportable sequence of events. For long unsolved cases, such as Sharon Hammock's, preserving investigative integrity remained essential. Detectives avoided drawing conclusions before the evidence justified them. Every potential lead required verification. Every laboratory result underwent careful review. Every significant finding was documented in detail. This methodical pace could appear slow from the outside. Families understandably hoped for definitive answers after waiting so many years. Communities that had followed the case for decades wanted to know whether meaningful progress had finally been achieved. Investigators, however, recognized that accuracy mattered more than speed. A premature conclusion unsupported by evidence could jeopardize both the investigation and any future legal proceedings. The passage of time had also introduced new investigative resources beyond laboratory science. Historical records could be digitized, making comparisons more efficient. Archived documents became easier to organize and analyze. Agencies were able to collaborate more effectively across jurisdictions, sharing expertise developed through other cold case investigations. These developments did not erase the challenges created by the passing decades. Witnesses remained more difficult to locate. Some individuals originally connected to the investigation had died. Memories inevitably became less precise. Nevertheless, the preserved evidence continued to offer opportunities that earlier investigators simply had not possessed. The persistence shown by generations of detectives reflected a broader commitment shared throughout modern law enforcement. The age of a homicide investigation does not diminish its importance. Families affected by violent crime continue to deserve careful, professional efforts to establish the truth whenever credible investigative avenues remain available. For Sharon Hammock's family, each renewed review represented another reminder that the case had not been forgotten. Although public attention naturally shifted over the years, investigators continued examining the evidence with the same fundamental objective that had guided the original inquiry, to determine what could be established through reliable facts and, if possible, identify those responsible according to the standards required by the justice system. The investigation therefore moved forward not through speculation or dramatic revelation, but through persistence, scientific progress, and a commitment to allowing evidence, not assumption, to guide every subsequent step. Years became decades, yet the central question remained unchanged. Could evidence preserved from the original investigation still reveal what had happened? By this stage, cold case investigations across the United States had demonstrated that the answer was sometimes yes. Advances in forensic science, coupled with careful evidence preservation, had led to the resolution of numerous historical homicide cases once believed unsolvable. Investigators reviewing Sharon Hammock's case approached the file with that experience in mind. Rather than searching for dramatic new leads, they focused on systematically evaluating the available evidence using contemporary investigative methods. Every significant item retained from the original inquiry was assessed to determine whether additional scientific examination might produce information unavailable to earlier investigators. This work required close coordination between detectives, forensic laboratories, prosecutors, and evidence custodians. Before testing could proceed, investigators confirmed the documented history of each evidentiary item, including its collection, storage, and handling. Maintaining an unbroken chain of custody was essential because any future legal action would depend upon the reliability and admissibility of the evidence. At the same time, forensic science itself continued to improve. Laboratories developed increasingly sensitive analytical techniques capable of examining smaller quantities of biological material while adhering to rigorous quality control standards. These advancements expanded investigative possibilities, although they did not guarantee that every historical case would produce conclusive results. Detectives remained careful not to interpret scientific findings in isolation. Laboratory results were evaluated alongside witness interviews, crime scene documentation, historical reports, and any additional information developed during subsequent reviews. Modern cold case investigations rely on this integrated approach, recognizing that reliable conclusions emerge from the combined weight of evidence rather than from any single source alone. Throughout the renewed examination of the case, investigators also considered whether previously documented information warranted follow-up under contemporary investigative standards. Where appropriate, historical records were re-examined, timelines were reconstructed, and existing documentation was reviewed for consistency. These efforts reflected the understanding that earlier investigators had worked within the technological limitations of their era, while today's investigators could benefit from decades of scientific and procedural advancement. For Sharon Hammock's surviving family members, the continuation of the investigation represented more than a procedural exercise. It demonstrated that the passage of time had not diminished the commitment to seeking answers. Although no investigative agency could promise a particular outcome, the willingness to continue examining the evidence acknowledged the enduring importance of the case. Cold case work is frequently characterized by patience rather than speed. Significant developments often occur only after lengthy forensic analysis, careful legal review, and extensive coordination among multiple professionals. Investigators therefore avoided public speculation, recognizing that accurate information serves both the interests of justice and the interests of affected families. The broader history of homicide investigations illustrates why such persistence matters. Numerous cases have ultimately been resolved because evidence preserved years or even decades earlier remained available for scientific examination once technology advanced sufficiently. These examples reinforce the importance of maintaining historical evidence whenever possible and of periodically reassessing unsolved investigations as investigative capabilities continue to evolve. Within that context, Sharon Hammock's case remained part of an ongoing effort to determine what the available evidence could reliably establish. Every review, every forensic examination, and every procedural step reflected the same guiding principle that had shaped the investigation from its beginning. Conclusions must rest on verifiable evidence, and the pursuit of justice should continue whenever credible investigative opportunities remain. By the time nearly 5 decades had passed since Sharon Hammock's death, the investigation had become more than a historical case file. It represented the cumulative work of multiple generations of investigators, forensic scientists, prosecutors, and support personnel who had inherited the responsibility of preserving both the evidence and the possibility of future resolution. One of the defining characteristics of long-term homicide investigations is institutional continuity. Individual detectives retire, laboratory personnel change, and investigative priorities evolve, yet the case itself remains. Each generation documents its work so that those who follow can understand what has already been examined, what questions remain unresolved, and which investigative options may still exist as technology advances. That continuity depends heavily on record preservation. Original reports retain significance because they capture observations made closest to the time of the crime. Crime scene photographs preserve details that may later assist forensic interpretation. Laboratory documentation establishes what testing has already been performed and what methods were available at the time. Evidence inventories ensure that physical exhibits can be located, evaluated, and, when appropriate, submitted for additional examination. As modern investigative techniques continue to develop, detectives responsible for reviewing historical homicides increasingly emphasized multidisciplinary collaboration. Cold case investigations no longer relied exclusively on traditional detective work. Instead, they often involve forensic biologists, DNA analysts, evidence specialists, prosecutors, and other experts whose combined knowledge could help evaluate complex historical evidence. This collaborative model reflected decades of experience gained through successful cold case investigations across the country. Rather than seeking dramatic investigative shortcuts, teams focused on careful analysis supported by documented facts. Potential findings were independently reviewed. Scientific conclusions were evaluated within established legal standards. Investigative decisions were documented thoroughly to ensure transparency and accountability. Throughout this process, investigators remained mindful that public interest in historical homicide cases often increases whenever new forensic techniques become available. Media attention can encourage witnesses to come forward with relevant information, but can also generate speculation unsupported by evidence. For that reason, investigators typically distinguish carefully between confirmed developments and unverified claims, recognizing that protecting the integrity of an ongoing investigation serves both the public interest and the interests of justice. The Sharon Hammock investigation continued within this disciplined framework. Each review sought to answer practical questions. Could existing evidence provide additional information? Had scientific capabilities advanced sufficiently to justify further examination? Did historical documentation identify investigative avenues that warranted renewed attention? These questions reflected an evidence-based approach rather than an assumption that every cold case can ultimately be solved. Experienced investigators recognize that some historical investigations remain limited by the evidence available. Nevertheless, the obligation to evaluate credible opportunities persists whenever meaningful advances in science or investigative methodology occur. The case also illustrated the broader value of preserving evidence over long periods. Decisions made by investigators during the original inquiry to collect, document, and retain physical evidence carefully created opportunities that later generations could explore using technologies not yet imagined at the time of the crime. Those early investigative efforts became an essential foundation for every subsequent review. For surviving family members, the continued examination of the case carried profound significance. Although the passage of time cannot reverse loss, ongoing investigative efforts demonstrate that unresolved homicides are not necessarily forgotten. Modern cold case programs exist because experience has shown that persistence, scientific advancement, and meticulous documentation can occasionally produce answers long after public attention has faded. Whether an investigation ultimately results in prosecution depends upon the strength of the available evidence and the legal standards governing criminal proceedings. Investigators therefore remain committed to allowing evidence to determine conclusions rather than allowing expectations to shape the interpretation of facts. As work on Sharon Hammock's case continued, that principle remained unchanged. The investigation advanced deliberately, guided by documentation, supported by forensic science where appropriate, and grounded in the understanding that every conclusion must be capable of withstanding both scientific examination and judicial scrutiny. Even after many decades, the central objective remained exactly what it had been from the beginning: to establish the facts as accurately and reliably as the evidence allowed. As the investigation entered its fifth decade, developments in forensic genealogy and DNA analysis were reshaping the landscape of cold case investigations across the United States. While these methods did not apply to every historical homicide, they demonstrated that carefully preserved biological evidence could, in some cases, generate investigative leads long after traditional avenues had been exhausted. Law enforcement agencies increasingly evaluated whether older evidence might benefit from techniques unavailable when the crimes were originally investigated. Such work required extensive planning and oversight. Before any advanced forensic analysis could be undertaken, investigators confirmed that the evidence remained suitable for testing and that all legal and procedural requirements have been satisfied. Laboratory specialists assessed the condition of biological material, while detectives reviewed historical documentation to ensure that any scientific findings could be interpreted accurately within the context of the original investigation. Cold case investigations often progress through a series of measured steps rather than dramatic breakthroughs. Evidence is evaluated. Results are independently reviewed. Potential leads are compared with existing investigative records. Prosecutors assess whether additional investigative work is necessary before any legal decisions are considered. This deliberate approach reflects the understanding that historical homicide investigations demand both scientific precision and procedural fairness. Throughout this period, investigators also benefited from broader institutional experience. Lessons learned from other long-unsolved cases informed best practices for evidence preservation, forensic analysis, witness re-interviews, and interagency cooperation. The field of cold case investigation had matured considerably since the 1970s, providing detectives with investigative resources unavailable to earlier generations. For Sharon Hammock's case, these broader developments reinforced an important principle: unresolved investigations should be periodically reassessed as technology evolves. The passage of time does not create evidence, but advances in scientific methodology may reveal information that could not previously be obtained from material already preserved. At the same time, investigators remain cautious about public expectations. Not every forensic examination produces conclusive results. Scientific testing may eliminate possibilities, clarify existing findings, or identify areas requiring additional investigation without immediately resolving every remaining question. Responsible investigative practice therefore requires patience and careful evaluation rather than premature conclusions. Communication with surviving family members remained an important consideration. Law enforcement agencies increasingly recognize that families affected by long unsolved homicides deserve timely and accurate information whenever significant investigative developments occur. Even when details cannot be disclosed publicly because of ongoing investigative needs, maintaining respectful communication helps reinforce confidence that the case continues to receive professional attention. The broader significance of historical homicide investigations extends beyond individual cases. Each successful review contributes to improvements in investigative procedures, evidence management, and forensic practice. Agencies refine preservation standards, laboratories develop more sensitive analytical methods, and prosecutors gain experience presenting complex historical evidence within contemporary legal frameworks. These institutional improvements benefit future investigations as well as historical ones. Evidence collected today may one day depend upon scientific techniques that do not yet exist. Accordingly, modern investigators continue emphasizing comprehensive documentation, careful preservation, and adherence to established forensic protocols. Within this evolving investigative environment, Sharon Hammock's case remained an example of long-term commitment to evidence-based review. Every preserved record, every documented observation, and every item of retained evidence continued to represent an opportunity for careful examination. While the investigation required extraordinary patience, its guiding principle never changed. Conclusions would be based on reliable evidence, evaluated through contemporary scientific methods, and measured against the legal standards necessary to ensure that any future resolution rested upon a solid and verifiable foundation. By the time investigators approached the case nearly half a century after Sharon Hammock's death, the objective had become increasingly focused. Determine whether the preserved evidence, when examined using contemporary forensic methods, could establish facts that had remained beyond the reach of the original investigation. Every step was guided by established scientific procedures and the legal requirements necessary for any future criminal prosecution. Cold case investigations at this stage often involve repeated consultation between detectives, forensic scientists, and prosecutors. Laboratory findings are not viewed in isolation. Instead, investigators compare scientific results with crime scene documentation, historical witness statements, investigative reports, and any additional information developed during earlier reviews. This comprehensive approach helps ensure that conclusions reflect the totality of the available evidence rather than any single investigative element. Modern forensic analysis can be highly sensitive, but investigators remain careful in interpreting results. Scientific evidence may strengthen an existing investigative theory, eliminate previously considered possibilities, or identify new avenues for inquiry. Equally important, it may demonstrate that certain assumptions made decades earlier cannot be supported by the available evidence. Maintaining objectivity throughout this process is essential to preserving the integrity of the investigation. As work continued, detectives also reviewed historical documentation to identify any investigative actions that might warrant renewed attention under contemporary standards. Where appropriate, records were compared, timelines reconstructed, and earlier findings reassessed in light of current forensic knowledge. This systematic review reflected a broader principle that has become central to successful cold case investigations. Technological advances are most effective when combined with careful analysis of the original investigative record. For the surviving members of Sharon Hammock's family, the continued work represented an acknowledgement that the search for answers had not ended with the passing decades. Although no investigative agency can guarantee a particular outcome, the willingness to continue examining credible evidence demonstrates an ongoing commitment to pursuing justice wherever reliable investigative opportunities remain. The case also illustrated the importance of long-term evidence preservation. Decisions made during the original investigation, documenting the scene, collecting physical evidence, maintaining records, and preserving exhibits, allowed later generations to apply scientific techniques unavailable at the time of the crime. Without those efforts, many investigative options would have been permanently lost. Across the United States, similar reviews have reinforced the value of preserving unsolved homicide evidence indefinitely whenever practical. Scientific methods continue to evolve, and evidence once considered inconclusive may acquire new significance as analytical capabilities improve. This principle has become a cornerstone of modern cold case investigation. Throughout the review of Sharon Hammock's case, investigators remained committed to allowing evidence, not speculation, to guide every decision. Public interest naturally accompanies historical homicide investigations, particularly those spanning several decades. Nevertheless, detectives and prosecutors consistently emphasize the importance of verified facts, recognizing that responsible communication protects both the integrity of the investigation and the fairness of any future judicial proceedings. As the investigative process moved forward, each carefully documented step reflected the same enduring commitment that had sustained the case for decades: to examine every credible opportunity, apply the best available scientific methods and determine, as accurately as the evidence allowed, what happened and whether the available facts could ultimately satisfy the legal standards required for criminal accountability. After decades of careful preservation, periodic review, and advances in forensic science, the investigation reached a stage where modern analytical methods offered opportunities that had not existed when Sharon Hammock's death was first investigated. Any significant development, however, still required the same fundamental standard that had guided the case from the beginning. Conclusions had to be supported by reliable evidence capable of withstanding legal scrutiny. Investigators approached each new forensic result with caution. Scientific findings were reviewed alongside the complete investigative record, rather than interpreted independently. Detectives compared laboratory analyses with original crime scene documentation, witness interviews, timelines, and previously established facts. This comprehensive process reflected the understanding that successful homicide investigations depend upon the combined weight of corroborating evidence. Throughout the review, prosecutors played an essential role in evaluating whether the available evidence, considered as a whole, could satisfy the legal burden required in criminal proceedings. The passage of time presents unique challenges in historical cases. Witness availability may be limited, memories naturally become less precise, and certain forms of evidence may no longer exist. Accordingly, every investigative decision required careful consideration of both scientific reliability and legal sufficiency. The evolution of forensic technology has fundamentally changed the way law enforcement approaches unresolved homicides. Methods unavailable in the 1970s have contributed to the resolution of numerous historical cases across the country. These developments reinforce the importance of preserving evidence whenever possible and periodically reassessing investigations as new scientific capabilities emerge. Equally significant is the institutional commitment demonstrated by long-term investigations. A case extending across several decades often involves numerous detectives, laboratory specialists, prosecutors, and support personnel. Although individual investigators change over time, comprehensive documentation allows each successive team to understand the work previously completed and identify remaining investigative opportunities. For Sharon Hammock's family, the continuation of the investigation reflected an enduring commitment by law enforcement to seek answers despite the passage of many years. While no investigative process can undo the loss experienced by surviving relatives, continued efforts acknowledge that unresolved homicides remain important regardless of their age. The pursuit of justice does not expire simply because time has passed. The broader significance of cold case investigations extends beyond individual prosecutions. Each review contributes to improvements in investigative practice, evidence preservation, forensic methodology, and interagency cooperation. Lessons learned from historical cases continue to influence how contemporary investigations are conducted, helping ensure that evidence collected today will remain useful should future scientific advances provide additional opportunities for analysis. Throughout every stage of the Sharon Hammock investigation, investigators remained guided by the same principle that defines responsible criminal inquiry. Evidence must determine conclusions. Speculation, rumor, and public assumptions cannot substitute for documented facts. Whether evaluating forensic findings, reviewing historical records, or considering investigative leads, detectives and prosecutors consistently relied upon information capable of independent verification. By maintaining that disciplined approach over many decades, investigators preserved the possibility that the available evidence could eventually provide a reliable account of the events surrounding Sharon Hammock's death. The case demonstrated that patience, scientific advancement, and careful documentation can remain valuable investigative resources long after a crime has faded from public attention, provided every conclusion continues to rest upon verifiable facts and established legal standards. Nearly half a century after Sharon Hammock's death, the investigation stood as a testament to one of the most important principles in modern criminal justice: The passage of time does not diminish the value of evidence or the responsibility to pursue the truth. Although the case had endured through changing generations of investigators, evolving forensic science, and decades of unanswered questions, it remained grounded in the same objective that had guided the original inquiry: to establish the facts through reliable, verifiable evidence. The history of the investigation also reflects the broader evolution of homicide investigations in the United States. What began during an era without DNA profiling, digital evidence management, or many of the forensic techniques available today gradually became part of a new generation of cold case reviews. Scientific advances expanded investigative possibilities, while improvements in evidence preservation and documentation demonstrated the lasting importance of careful police work performed at the very beginning of an investigation. For the Hammock family, the years represented far more than the passage of time. Every anniversary served as a reminder of a life cut short and of questions that remained unresolved for decades. Families connected to long unsolved homicide investigations often describe the experience as living without a final chapter. While grief evolves over time, uncertainty can remain constant, making each new investigative development deeply significant. Cold case investigations also carry lessons that extend beyond any single case. They emphasize the importance of preserving evidence whenever possible, documenting investigative decisions thoroughly, and remaining open to future scientific developments. Methods unavailable today may become routine tomorrow, just as forensic techniques once considered impossible are now standard investigative tools. The careful work of one generation may ultimately provide answers for the next. Throughout the decades, investigators assigned to Sharon Hammock's case inherited more than reports and evidence. They inherited a commitment. Each detective, forensic specialist, prosecutor, and support professional contributed to an investigation that required patience, objectivity, and respect for both the evidence and the people affected by the crime. Their work illustrates that cold cases are not simply historical records. They're ongoing efforts to determine whether justice can still be achieved through lawful and scientifically supported means. Equally important is the distinction between evidence and speculation. High-profile, unsolved cases often generate theories, rumors, and public discussion. Responsible investigations, however, depend upon documented facts capable of independent verification. Maintaining that distinction protects the integrity of the investigative process and helps ensure that any conclusions reached are supported by reliable evidence rather than assumption. The legacy of the Sharon Hammock investigation is therefore measured not only by its duration, but also by the persistence with which it was pursued. It demonstrates how advances in forensic science, combined with careful preservation of evidence and disciplined investigative review, can keep even decades-old cases active. It also serves as a reminder that every unsolved homicide represents a person whose life mattered, a family whose questions deserve careful attention, and a community that benefits when investigations remain guided by evidence rather than conjecture. In the end, the story is not simply about the passing of nearly 50 years. It is about the enduring responsibility of the justice system to revisit credible evidence whenever new opportunities arise, to apply the best available scientific methods, and to follow the facts wherever they lead. Sharon Hammock's case remains an example of that commitment, a reminder that while time changes investigators, technology, and communities, the pursuit of truth remains constant. Whether measured in months or decades, that pursuit depends on patience, professionalism, and the belief that every credible opportunity to establish the facts deserves to be examined with care. The story of Sharon Hammock did not end on the day investigators closed a file or completed another round of forensic testing. In many ways, it became part of a much larger story, one shared by thousands of families across the United States whose lives were forever altered by an unsolved homicide. Her case came to represent both the frustrations of an earlier era and the determination of modern investigators who refused to accept that time alone should decide whether justice could ever be achieved. When Sharon was killed in the 1970s, forensic science was still limited by the technology of its day. Detectives relied heavily on witness interviews, physical observations, and laboratory methods that now seem modest compared with today's capabilities. DNA profiling had not yet entered criminal investigations. National databases capable of linking evidence across jurisdictions did not exist. Investigators worked with the best tools available, knowing that some questions simply could not be answered through science at the time. The decades that followed transformed criminal investigation in ways few could have imagined. DNA analysis became one of the most powerful forensic tools ever developed. Digital evidence management allowed agencies to preserve and organize historical investigations more effectively. Laboratories learned to recover usable information from increasingly small and degraded biological samples. Cold case units emerged across the country, dedicated to reviewing investigations that had once appeared beyond the reach of justice. These developments changed expectations, not only within law enforcement, but also among the public. Cases once considered permanently unsolved were revisited with fresh determination. Families who had waited decades sometimes received answers they had long believed impossible. Each successful resolution demonstrated an important truth. Careful evidence preservation can allow tomorrow's science to answer yesterday's questions. The investigation into Sharon Hammock's death stands as part of that broader evolution. It reminds investigators that every crime scene deserves meticulous documentation. Every photograph matters. Every evidence envelope matters. Every written report may one day become the foundation for work performed by a future generation of detectives using technologies not yet invented. This lesson extends well beyond a single investigation. Modern homicide detectives often train with historical cases precisely because they illustrate how critical early decisions become decades later. Evidence that appears insignificant during an initial investigation may later prove invaluable as scientific methods continue to evolve. Preserving that evidence is not simply an administrative responsibility. It is an investment in the possibility of future truth. For families, however, the meaning of a cold case is measured differently. It is measured in birthdays missed, in holidays marked by an empty chair, in photographs that grow older while memories struggle to remain vivid. Justice, when it finally arrives after many years, cannot restore the life that was lost. It cannot erase decades of uncertainty, but it can answer questions that have remained unresolved for generations, reaffirming the principle that every victim deserves the full commitment of the justice system regardless of how much time has passed. The broader history of cold case investigations offers reason for cautious optimism. Scientific progress continues. Investigative techniques continue to improve. Collaboration between agencies, forensic laboratories, and prosecutors has become more sophisticated than ever before. Every advancement strengthens the ability of law enforcement to evaluate historical evidence with greater accuracy and confidence. At the same time, Sharon Hammock's story serves as a reminder that justice depends upon more than technology alone. It depends on patience, on professionalism, on investigators willing to review thousands of pages of historical records, on forensic scientists committed to objective analysis, on prosecutors determined to ensure that every conclusion is supported by reliable, admissible evidence. Above all, it depends upon an unwavering respect for the truth. The passage of time may complicate an investigation, but does not diminish the value of facts. Evidence remains the foundation of every responsible criminal inquiry. It is evidence, not rumor, speculation, or assumption, that ultimately determines whether justice can be achieved. For those who study cold cases today, the legacy of Sharon Hammock's investigation reaches beyond its individual facts. It reflects the evolution of forensic science, the importance of preserving evidence, and the enduring obligation of the criminal justice system to revisit unresolved cases whenever credible investigative opportunities arise. Perhaps that is the most enduring lesson of all. No matter how many years pass, every unsolved homicide represents more than a file stored in an evidence room. It represents a life interrupted, a family forever changed, and a promise that the search for truth should never be abandoned simply because the calendar continues to move forward. And while history cannot be rewritten, it can be more fully understood when investigators, scientists, and communities remain committed to the same principle that has guided the best cold case investigations for generations. That every victim deserves to be remembered, every piece of evidence deserves to be preserved, and every credible path toward the truth deserves to be followed with integrity, patience, and respect for the facts. For generations of detectives, one phrase has remained remarkably consistent. A homicide investigation is never measured by how quickly it is solved, but by whether the truth can ultimately be established through evidence. The history of Sharon Hammock's case illustrates that principle with unusual clarity. What began as a local homicide investigation in the 1970s eventually became part of a much broader transformation in American criminal justice. A transformation driven not by changing theories, but by changing science. Half a century ago, investigators worked in an era when forensic resources were limited by the technology of the time. Biological evidence could often confirm that a crime had occurred, yet identifying the individual responsible frequently depended on eyewitness testimony, physical observations, confessions, or circumstantial evidence. Detectives documented crime scenes with extraordinary care because they understood an important truth even then: evidence, once lost, can never be recreated. That philosophy has proven remarkably enduring. Many of today's cold case breakthroughs are possible only because investigators decades earlier collected, labeled, photographed, and preserved evidence that seemed unlikely to provide immediate answers. Their decisions, made without knowing what future science would become, created opportunities for later generations that otherwise would never have existed. DNA profiling fundamentally changed that landscape. Beginning in the late 20th century and continuing through the decades that followed, forensic laboratories developed methods capable of identifying individuals with unprecedented accuracy for biological evidence. As techniques improved, increasingly smaller and more degraded samples became suitable for analysis. Evidence once considered scientifically uninformative could sometimes be re-examined using technologies unavailable when the crime originally occurred. This evolution reshaped the meaning of the term cold case. Rather than signifying an investigation permanently beyond resolution, it increasingly came to describe an investigation awaiting new opportunities, whether through scientific advancement, newly discovered evidence, or information that had previously gone unrecognized. Law enforcement agencies responded accordingly. Across the United States, specialized cold case units were established to review historical homicides systematically. Detectives revisited investigative files, re-examined preserved evidence, consulted forensic experts, and applied contemporary investigative methods to crimes committed decades earlier. These reviews demanded extraordinary patience. Thousands of pages of reports often required careful study. Evidence inventories had to be verified. Laboratory examinations could take months or even years. Progress rarely occurred through dramatic revelations. Instead, it emerged through meticulous documentation, disciplined analysis, and collaboration among investigators, forensic scientists, prosecutors, and evidence custodians. The lessons learned from investigations, such as Sharon Hammock's, continue to influence homicide investigations today. Crime scenes are documented more comprehensively. Evidence preservation standards have become increasingly rigorous. Digital evidence management systems reduce the risk of losing historical records. Laboratories maintain strict quality control procedures designed to ensure scientific reliability. Each improvement reflects decades of practical experience gained through both solved and unsolved investigations. Another important lesson concerns public expectations. Popular culture often portrays homicide investigations as sequences of immediate breakthroughs and dramatic confrontations. In reality, successful investigations, particularly historical ones, are typically defined by persistence rather than speed. Detectives may spend months verifying a single investigative detail. Laboratory scientists carefully evaluate results before drawing conclusions. Prosecutors review evidence against demanding legal standards to ensure that any future proceedings are supported by reliable, admissible proof. This deliberate process protects not only the integrity of the investigation, but also the fairness of the justice system itself. For families affected by violent crime, however, the passage of time carries a different meaning. Every year represents another birthday not celebrated, another holiday marked by absence, another reminder that unanswered questions can endure long after public attention has shifted elsewhere. That reality explains why cold case investigations remain so important. Even when decades have passed, continued investigative effort acknowledges that victims are not forgotten simply because the calendar has advanced. The pursuit of truth remains an essential responsibility, independent of how much time has elapsed since the crime occurred. Sharon Hammock's case, therefore, occupies an important place within the broader history of forensic investigation, not only because of its duration, but because it reflects the remarkable evolution of criminal justice over the past 50 years. It demonstrates how careful evidence preservation, scientific advancement, and institutional persistence can keep the possibility of answers alive across generations. Perhaps the most enduring legacy of cases like this lies in what they teach future investigators. Preserve every piece of evidence. Document every observation. Question every assumption. Allow science to evolve. Allow evidence, not speculation, to determine conclusions. Because no investigator can know which seemingly ordinary decision made today may become the critical foundation for discovering the truth decades from now. That principle has become one of the defining characteristics of modern cold case investigation. It is a reminder that justice is not measured solely by speed, but by accuracy, integrity, and the willingness to continue searching whenever credible evidence offers another opportunity to understand what happened. And in that sense, the legacy of Sharon Hammock extends beyond a single investigation. It endures as part of the continuing effort to ensure that every victim is remembered, every investigation is conducted with professionalism, and every credible path toward the truth remains open for as long as the evidence allows. Long after newspaper headlines disappear and television cameras leave, homicide investigations continue in quieter ways. Files remain preserved in evidence rooms. Laboratory reports stay archived. Investigators retire, yet the work they documented becomes the foundation for those who follow. In that respect, the history of Sharon Hammock's case reflects something larger than a single investigation. It illustrates how the criminal justice system attempts to balance patience with persistence, recognizing that unanswered questions deserve continued attention whenever credible investigative opportunities emerge. One of the most significant changes over the past several decades has been the growing emphasis on multidisciplinary investigation. Modern cold case reviews are rarely conducted by a single detective working alone. Instead, they often involve teams that combine investigative experience with expertise in forensic biology, DNA analysis, digital records management, legal review, and evidence preservation. Each discipline contributes a different perspective, reducing the likelihood that important details will be overlooked. This collaborative approach has become a defining feature of contemporary homicide investigations. Scientific evidence is evaluated alongside investigative documentation. Laboratory findings are interpreted within the broader factual record. Legal considerations are addressed throughout the process, rather than only after an investigation concludes. The objective remains consistent. Establish conclusions supported by evidence that is both scientifically reliable and legally admissible. Equally important is the recognition that technology will continue to evolve. Investigators today preserve evidence not only for current examination, but also for methods that may be developed years from now. Advances in forensic science have repeatedly demonstrated that analytical capabilities once considered impossible can become routine. As a result, agencies increasingly emphasize long-term evidence preservation, comprehensive documentation, and secure chain-of-custody procedures. These practices benefit future investigations regardless of whether immediate answers are available. The experience gained from reviewing historical homicide cases has also influenced the training of new investigators. Detectives study earlier investigations to understand both successful practices and the limitations imposed by the technology of the time. Historical cases provide valuable lessons about crime scene management, witness interviewing, documentation, and the importance of avoiding assumptions before evidence has been fully evaluated. Another important development has been increased cooperation between jurisdictions. Modern investigative databases, standardized reporting systems, and improved communication allow agencies to compare information more efficiently than was possible decades ago. Although every case presents unique circumstances, stronger institutional cooperation has expanded the investigative resources available for reviewing historical crimes. For families affected by unsolved homicides, these developments represent more than procedural improvements. They demonstrate an ongoing commitment to ensuring that cases are not forgotten simply because they become older. While no investigative process can promise a particular outcome, continued review acknowledges that every victim deserves professional, evidence-based efforts whenever meaningful opportunities remain. The broader public also plays a role in supporting responsible investigations. Public awareness encourages appreciation for the importance of preserving evidence, respecting investigative procedures, and distinguishing verified facts from speculation. Historical homicide cases often generate significant public interest, but lasting confidence in the justice system depends upon allowing evidence, not rumor, to guide investigative conclusions. As forensic science continues to develop, future investigators will almost certainly possess tools beyond those available today. Just as DNA transformed criminal investigation during the past several decades, new scientific methods may further expand the ability to examine historical evidence with even greater precision. That possibility reinforces an enduring principle. Preserving evidence carefully today protects opportunities for tomorrow. The lasting significance of Sharon Hammock's case therefore extends beyond its place in investigative history. It serves as a reminder that criminal investigations are cumulative efforts built across generations by individuals committed to careful documentation, objective analysis, and respect for the rule of law. Every report prepared, every exhibit preserved, and every forensic examination completed contributes to a larger system designed to pursue the truth through reliable evidence. Ultimately, the history of this investigation underscores a lesson that continues to shape modern law enforcement. Justice is not solely the product of technological innovation. It also depends upon diligence, professionalism, transparency, and a willingness to revisit difficult questions whenever credible evidence justifies renewed examination. Those principles remain central to every responsible cold case investigation and continue to guide the ongoing pursuit of truth in cases that have challenged investigators for decades. The passage of time is often described as the greatest obstacle in a homicide investigation. Witnesses move away. Memories become less precise. Physical landscapes change, and the people originally involved in an investigation may no longer be available to answer questions. Yet the history of cold case investigations demonstrates that time is not solely an adversary. When evidence has been carefully preserved and investigative records remain complete, The passing years can also coincide with scientific progress that creates entirely new opportunities to establish the facts. That principle has reshaped the way law enforcement agencies approach unsolved homicides. Rather than viewing an unresolved case as permanently beyond reach, many agencies now recognize it as an investigation that may benefit from future advances in forensic science, analytical methods, and investigative collaboration. This perspective has led to the creation of dedicated cold case programs, periodic evidence reviews, and long-term preservation strategies designed to protect the possibility of future breakthroughs. The importance of documentation cannot be overstated. Every crime scene photograph captures details that cannot be recreated. Every evidence log records the history of an exhibit from collection through storage. Every investigative report preserves observations made when events were still fresh. Together, these records form the foundation upon which later investigators build their work. Forensic science has become one of the most visible drivers of progress, but it functions most effectively when supported by meticulous investigative practices. Laboratory findings must be interpreted within the broader, factual context established by detectives. Scientific results are strengthened when they correspond with documented timelines, physical evidence, and other independently verified information. This integration of science and investigation has become a defining characteristic of modern homicide inquiry. The evolution of cold case investigations has also encouraged greater cooperation among agencies and disciplines. Detectives, forensic scientists, prosecutors, evidence custodians, and legal advisors each contribute specialized knowledge. Their combined efforts help ensure that historical evidence is examined thoroughly, interpreted accurately, and evaluated according to contemporary scientific and legal standards. Such collaboration reflects a broader commitment to fairness. Every conclusion must be supported by evidence. Every investigative decision must be documented. Every forensic finding must withstand independent review. These safeguards protect both the integrity of the investigation and the legitimacy of any future judicial proceedings. Historical cases have also influenced the education of new investigators. Police academies, forensic training programs, and professional development courses frequently draw upon lessons learned from decades-old investigations. They emphasize careful crime scene management, objective evidence collection, comprehensive report writing, and the importance of avoiding premature conclusions. In this way, earlier investigations continue to shape the practices that guide present-day law enforcement. Public understanding has evolved as well. Advances in forensic science have increased awareness that some investigations may require years or even decades to reach reliable conclusions. Although media attention often focuses on immediate developments, experienced investigators recognize that lasting results are achieved through patience, careful analysis, and adherence to established investigative standards. The legacy of cases such as Sharon Hammock's, therefore, extends beyond the facts of a single investigation. They remind both investigators and the public that justice depends on sustained commitment rather than immediate resolution. They demonstrate why evidence preservation remains one of the most important responsibilities in criminal investigation and why every documented observation may retain value long after a case leaves the headlines. Looking ahead, the future of cold case investigation will almost certainly continue to evolve. Improvements in forensic technology, digital record management, and analytical techniques are expected to expand investigative capabilities even further. At the same time, the fundamental principles that guide responsible homicide investigations are unlikely to change. Protect the evidence. Document the facts. Test conclusions against reliable information. Allow science to inform the investigation without replacing sound investigative judgment. Above all, remain committed to following the evidence wherever it leads. Those principles define the enduring purpose of cold case work. They recognize that while no investigative system can undo the harm caused by violent crime, it can continue striving to establish the truth through objective, verifiable evidence. That commitment is what gives historical investigations their lasting significance, not simply because they are old, but because they reaffirm that every victim deserves a careful, professional effort to determine the facts, regardless of how much time has passed. The significance of a cold case is not measured solely by whether it results in an arrest or prosecution. Some investigations leave a lasting impact because they influence how future cases are handled. They remind investigators that every decision made during the earliest stages of an inquiry may carry consequences decades later. The history of the Sharon Hammock investigation underscores that enduring lesson. Modern homicide investigations place extraordinary emphasis on preserving every available piece of evidence. Crime scenes are documented extensively through photography, mapping, and detailed written reports. Biological evidence is collected using standardized procedures designed to minimize contamination. Every transfer of evidence is recorded to preserve an unbroken chain of custody. These practices have become routine not only because they improve current investigations, but because they protect the possibility that future scientific advances may reveal information unavailable today. This philosophy has transformed the way law enforcement agencies think about long-term investigations. Evidence is no longer viewed only in terms of its immediate value. It is preserved with future analysis in mind. Investigators recognize that scientific capabilities continue to evolve, and that evidence considered inconclusive today may become highly informative years from now. Equally important is the role of accurate documentation. Cold case investigators often rely more heavily on original reports than on recollections formed decades later. Notes prepared by detectives at the time of the investigation capture observations made while evidence was fresh and scenes remained unchanged. Those records become invaluable historical documents, allowing future investigators to reconstruct events with greater confidence. The lessons extend beyond forensic science. Interview techniques have also evolved significantly over the years. Contemporary investigators receive extensive training in evidence-based interviewing methods that encourage accurate recollection while minimizing the risk of introducing suggestion or bias. Careful documentation of witness statements, together with audio or video recording where appropriate, helps preserve the integrity of those accounts for future review. Digital technology has further strengthened investigative continuity. Electronic case management systems allow agencies to organize reports, photographs, laboratory findings, and evidence inventories more efficiently than paper files alone. Information can be searched, compared, and shared across investigative teams while maintaining detailed records of revisions and updates. These improvements reduce the likelihood that important information will be overlooked as investigations extend across many years. Another important development is the increased collaboration between local, state, and federal partners. Complex investigations may benefit from specialized forensic laboratories, analytical expertise, or additional investigative resources. Such cooperation enables agencies to draw upon broader experience while maintaining responsibility for the facts of the individual case. These institutional improvements reflect a larger commitment to continuous learning. Every investigation contributes lessons. Every solved case informs future practice. Every unresolved case encourages agencies to evaluate how procedures can be strengthened. In this way, even difficult investigations help improve the criminal justice system over time. For families affected by homicide, these developments carry meaningful implications. While procedural improvements cannot erase loss, they increase the likelihood that evidence will remain available for future review if new scientific opportunities emerge. Continued investment in evidence preservation and forensic capability reflects a recognition that justice may require persistence extending well beyond the initial investigation. The broader public also benefits from understanding how cold case investigations actually work. Popular portrayals often emphasize dramatic breakthroughs, but real investigations are usually built through careful analysis, patient review, and disciplined adherence to evidence. Scientific findings are evaluated cautiously. Investigative conclusions are tested repeatedly. Prosecutors assess whether the available evidence satisfies the legal standards required in court. Each step reinforces the principle that reliable outcomes depend upon methodical work rather than speculation. Ultimately, the enduring importance of Sharon Hammock's case lies not only in its place within investigative history, but also in the broader lessons it offers. It demonstrates why preserving evidence matters, why accurate documentation remains indispensable, and why advances in forensic science must always be accompanied by careful investigative judgment. Above all, it reminds us that the pursuit of truth is a long-term responsibility, one carried forward by generations of investigators committed to following the evidence wherever it may lead, with professionalism, integrity, and respect for the rule of law.